Okay. Welcome everyone to this interview with two of the co-founders of Gracies Dinnertime Theater. My name is Igor Polotai. I am a current second-year game design and development student who, for the past couple of months, have been working on a massive RIT history compendium project called the RIT Iceberg, which should hopefully release in about a month. And so today I have the great pleasure of interviewing two of the main co-founders of Gracies Dinnertime Theater, a important part of RIT's history.
We're excited.
Yeah. With me today, I have 25 prepared questions. But if we go on side tangents, we're fine with that too.
Tangents are what GDT was built off of originally anyways.
Yeah, I can pretty much guarantee there will be side tangents.
So yeah, why don't you two introduce yourselves?
I am Kelly Gunter. I was one of the main editors and writers and the Barefoot Girl back in the day.
My name is Shanti Hammond. Yeah, I was also one of the three original founders of Gracie's Dinnertime Theater.
So there were two writers generally, and then the third person, Mark Chepla, was an illustrator. So he didn't involve himself with the writing process really at all. That was Sean and I.
Right.
Okay. So let's get started. First question. Well, first question was introduction, but second question was prior to like GDC, what was like your kind of like favorite thing of RIT about like from that time, from like 1995, or whenever you were in college?
Absolutely nothing. Prior to Grace's Dinnertime Theater really starting up and getting to eventually become what it became, I had applied to transfer to another university. I didn't particularly like anything about the social life of RIT. I ended up staying because I critically evaluated what were my reasons for wanting to leave RIT, and I realized that they were purely social, and that they were not related to the academics at RIT, which I felt were really fantastic. I thought the academics were good. I thought the program I was in was good. I just thought that RIT was an architectural and cultural wasteland.
I, on the other hand, had I was deeply involved in the I was in the craft school, the School for American Crafts, and I really enjoyed my program. I also had friends at Art House and friends at CSH, and I don't know, something I really enjoyed at that time was invented by Gil Merritt, called Vampire Tag. I don't know if you guys still do it today, but that was a good time.
Vampire Tag is so fun.
I'm not familiar with that, so I think that has kind of fallen out of interest or even public knowledge.
It may have. It was a good time. You'd go to a giant wooden playground. You were not allowed to touch the ground. You had to stay on the playground at all times. There were stakes that you could stake the vampires with, and there were crucifixes, and there were other rules involved, but it was a lot of fun. Very active. Many people got injured.
Okay, so what was like the culture around RIT, kind of like that GDT kind of grew from?
Well, to take a quote from Al Simone, we were told that the art students were there so that the engineering students could look over while they're walking across the quarter mile and see something a little different.
Mhm.
And that was about the support that the art schools got back in those days.
So
Yeah.
can I get clarification on your question? Are you asking what was it about the environment at that time period at RIT that led to GDT, or are you just asking about, what was RIT like at that time period?
Both kind of. Well, more so the second question, but I would like to hear more about the first part as well. But that kind of goes into question number 4. So,
Okay.
just like what was just the general culture at RIT at that time?
So at the time period, RIT was on the quarter system, not the semester system. So what that meant, at least within my program, was that the reality was that it was a semester worth of material crammed into 10 weeks. RIT, from my experience, was very much a run as fast as you can. And if you can't keep up, then you're out.
Yeah, there was a lot of students that just couldn't take it, and there was a huge dropout rate.
My
when
first
we were there.
semester, I was in a dorm room built for 2 that had 3 people in it. At the end of the first semester, I had a single because both students, one dropped out and one moved out. So the academic challenge at RIT was very, very high.
As a student, I liked how the academic aspect went. I enjoyed that level, having to work like that. That was a good time for me. But later on, shortly thereafter I went through that, I also became a teacher at RIT. And I have to say, on the quarter system, it is brutal trying to get everything into 10 weeks. It was really hard. So I think as a teacher, I understood why more of the students had been complaining earlier.
But in addition, to sort of dig a little bit more into what the culture was and sort of the vibe of the campus, there was no student theater at the time. RIT
Not early.
RIT Players
later.
did not exist
Yeah.
at the time period. I believe they're still called RIT Players.
Yeah.
So RIT Players did not exist. There was Art House, as Kelly indicated. There was CSH. There were the
Photo
frat.
House,
There was Frat Row.
engineering, all those.
Yep.
Unity House. I
Yep.
think Unity House was made while we were there.
It might have been. This was just before the internet became popular, right? So the Mosaic browser came out in like late 94-ish, something like that. So the prior to that, I mean, there was like Usenet and things like that. There wasn't an internet, so memes were not spreading as quickly as they were. There was not a really easy way, for example, to read The Onion or anything like that. Each university was extremely insular, even within Rochester. If we're talking about RIT and the U of R and MCC, there was very, very little feedback and contact for the students between them. So into all of that, the main source of entertainment, besides like watching TV, was the reporter on campus. That was
I did
the
not
thing.
find that to be the case.
Well, that was part of the problem.
I had a much better social life than you did.
That was part of the problem on RIT from my perspective. I had a beef with the reporter, and that influenced a lot of
Yes.
how things played out.
Incidentally, when we started GDT, my sister was the head editor of the reporter.
Yeah, truth.
Okay. So I guess I'll jump one question ahead since we're on the topic of the reporter. What are your thoughts on the reporter? So I like from reading the GDP website, I generally know like the origin story. There was an article that got rejected from the reporter, which was one of the contributing factors of GDD coming around. But I'm curious as to like how the reporter was perceived at that time, and potentially what your beef was with it.
The only one where the beef was Sean.
Yep.
Yeah, pretty much. So there were a couple things that really bothered me about the reporter. I am not a person that was trained in layout or graphic design or anything like that, but I have a strong feeling and have, which is one of the reasons I got involved with something like GDT, that when you're conveying information, it should be conveyed in a way that allows the reader to digest it easily. That if you are intentionally muddying your layout and obscuring text and making it hard to read, that's a major problem, particularly for people like me who have dyslexia. The intentional artistic decisions reporter was making to do layout that obscured their content made it extremely difficult to read, to understand what was going on. On top of that, there were, and I'm not one to speak because dyslexia and writing problems, but there were so many grammar problems and so many spelling problems. It was just, I felt, not the type of magazine that should exist for a student body. I thought that the standards should be high. And on top of that, sometimes reporter never hit its deadline. They were, at that time period, I don't know if they still are, but at the time period, they were supposed to have an issue every week during the quarter system. So that works out to be like 30 per quarter. But there were some weeks where they would be, late, like they would appear in the middle of the week or something. And I thought that was really, really terrible. That if you have a deadline as a publication, you need to hit that deadline. This is journalism 101, in my opinion. So all that together led to me having serious problems with what I saw as what should have been a professional student publication, but it was not. I don't care how many awards they won. If you can't hit your deadlines and if you can't make your content legible, then you're doing it wrong, and you should be punished accordingly.
To make a sort of overview about the reporter for other students at the time, I didn't read it at all. I would see it around, I wouldn't read it. But I know the other students did, because every year they would have a humor publication they called The Distorter. And when The Distorter came out one year, I had all sorts of people approaching me saying that they'd been writing about me. So I know there were a lot of people who read it.
Yeah, you were one of the RIT creatures at that time period.
I was well known by everybody on campus.
So yeah, that's the beef. Later on, we challenged them to a war on a regular basis. They never showed up.
Yeah, it was more of a one-person beef, though nobody else really cared.
Yeah.
Okay, so
we did make them pretty angry a couple times.
Yeah.
Okay. So So aside from like what you wrote in like the frequently asked questions, um, would you like to explain kind of the origin story of GDT for anyone potentially listening to the interview who's not familiar with the story?
So the origin, depending on who you talk to, whether you talk to myself or Kelly, or if you were to reach out to Mark Chepla and talk to him, the origin story is going to be slightly different for each of us, right? Because all three of us who started it, we had
Coming at
different
it from different perspectives.
we had different reasons to want to do this. But the overall, like, all right, so let me try and organize my thoughts on this. The name, from my perspective,
The name was all him.
the name was me. And it was derived from two things. The first was on TV at that time period was Mystery Science Theater 3000. And for those that might not be aware of the idea behind MST3K, you have these shadow cutouts at the front where it looks like you're in a movie theater. One person, two robots are watching typically bad sci-fi movies, and they're sort of making fun of it as the whole thing goes along. This was on Comedy Central at the time period. At that time period, I would go to dinner with a small group of friends, and we would end up talking about ideas and extending them to their logical, illogical extremes. Like if you take an idea and continue to logically extend on that idea, what absurdity do you end up with? And we sort of jokingly were referring to it as Gracie's Dinnertime Theater. And we talked about approaching the RIT radio station at the time. You know, would we be able to do something like this as a radio show? But it was too much of a pain in the butt to think about. So that got shelved, and nothing came of that.
Maybe if the internet was a little farther along.
Yeah, if the internet were just a little bit further along.
Because he's talking, what, 92?
92, 93.
Yeah, so it was too early.
Yeah, absolutely no hint of like the modern internet. And then later on, I got frustrated with the reporter, and by that time period, I had met Kelly Gunter and Mark Chepla.
We were all on the same floor.
We were on Stall 9 at the time. And Mark Chepla was somebody who took notes for the deaf students at the time. So he would sit in on classes, and he was an illustrator. So he would illustrate the notes in real time to, these funny little things. And when we submitted that first potential article to the reporter, the initial idea was, hey, the reporter I don't like how the reporter is. So instead of complaining, why don't I try and fix the thing? We wrote an article together, and Mark Chepla illustrated it in a particular way, the way that he would, as though he were taking notes for a class. And it got submitted and rejected.
My sister rejected it. She said, I understand how this is funny for you, but we can't print this.
So a couple days passed, and both Mark and I were kind of in the doldrums about it. And Kelly said, why don't we publish it ourselves? And that's how it started. We gave it a name. I gave it a name, Gracie's Dinnertime Theater. And we published it. And we had no intention of it
Making
going
it any sort of thing, but we just kept going. So
if you look at the first couple episodes of Gracie's Dinnertime Theater, they are numbered in a weird way. So the first 4 episodes are volume 1, issue 1, and then it's volume 2, issue 1, volume 3, issue 1. It wasn't until we got our first hate mail that we thought to ourselves, I think it was after 4.
Okay.
I think I think episode number 4 was the barefoot girl, and we got hate mail about it.
So that episode was about, it was about me, because
It was about you, written by you.
Yeah, it wasn't entirely written by me. Okay, I wasn't going to say some of those things, but the episode, it was a compendium of what I had heard from friends, of what they had heard other people say my origin was. So everybody was trying to figure out how I existed at RIT, and so they would make up stories about where I came from. I came from Alaska, I came from a really cold place, that's why I could go barefoot. Or I came from the South, that's why I could go barefoot. Or my favorite personal one was that I was raised by wolves. So I collected all these stories I'd heard from friends that had been, so they would have friends going, you know, that girl, do you know how she came like that? And so they would just hear things and they would pass them on to me. So we just collected them and we turned it into an article. And
we got hate mail.
We got hate mail.
Somebody white knighting the barefoot girl.
He didn't realize that I was one of the writers for the article.
And so of course we published the hate mail. And Kelly wrote editorial. I think that was our first editorial.
That was probably our first editorial.
And by then we had discovered that there was a backside of the piece of paper. So we had gone from being a single-sided thing to a double-sided thing. Revelatory.
Do we say how we were printing ourselves?
Initially, we were just using photocopiers. It was later.
No, it was.
No, those first ones were photocopiers.
Okay.
The first ones.
That was just out of pocket.
It was in the library out of pocket.
Yeah. And then later we found out we could print them at the computer lab.
So yeah, once we got hate mail, we realized, hey.
Okay,
wait a minute.
Again, this is Sean speaking for Sean.
Okay.
He's the only one who really cares about getting hate mail.
When we got hate mail, I realized, hey, if people care enough to send in hate mail, maybe we're on to something. Yeah, so that was the beginning.
Okay.
Going.
And then in the picture of the 3 of you standing with the meter stick, who is, so Sean, are you the tall one or the short one?
The short one.
I am the little bar in I'm fun sized.
It's and then what was Robert's role? So in your Who's Responsible section, you have Robert McKay as another important member of the kind of founding of GDT, but according to you, he left shortly after and then wasn't that, didn't participate much else. So what was his kind of role in its development?
That was mostly for Sean.
Yeah.
I had very little interaction with Rob McKay.
So Rob McKay was really one of the major people with whom we would play this game of how do you take an idea and logically expand upon it until you reach absurd conclusions. Because if you take any idea and keep logically building upon it, you can end up at some pretty bizarre locations.
And that was sort of the end goal for us.
Yeah, that
was to see where we could carry ourselves.
So that idea ended up being the core behind what Kelly and I referred to as main articles. So early on, when we were editors, there would be a main article that would be published in Gracies Dinnertime Theater.
The main article was what the whole thing was sort of built around, and the process was amazing. We would often have somebody would have an idea and they would write something up, and then all of the people involved in the writing process, we would all be in the same room, and we would have one person at the computer reading out the article and other people in the room shouting out ideas of how this needs to go at that point. It would add in footnotes, or we would go on side tangents in the article, or I mean, at one point we have a squirrel hurtling through the universe with a flashlight in its mouth, and this it sparked a whole other article in itself.
Man, I loved that article.
But it was a very chaotic process where you go through and people say things and then you work that in and you try to make it work, and you find how you can fit things in. But that was what we did every week. We would get together, we would have, and sometimes we couldn't work on something. We would try something and we couldn't get anywhere. So we would have multiple articles that had been started that we just hadn't been able to get to yet.
Yeah. And this method of writing was very specific for Kelly and I and how we organized it.
But we had as many as 7 people at a time working on an article together,
and
like this.
It was a process where you definitely had to put your ego aside, because if you were writing something, you couldn't be attached to it, because the end product might end up
like the start.
Yeah, it might end up being very, very different. So if you were very attached to what you wrote, then you probably shouldn't submit it as a main article, because it's going to get torn apart and reconstructed.
It was going to turn into Frankenstein's monster somehow.
And some of them end up, you could read them and they're pretty chaotic, but frankly, some of them I read today and I'm like, wow, that's really quite good.
Okay. Also, just to let you know, I think every 30 minutes we'll need to switch to a different Zoom call, because
Okay.
Zoom is limiting our meeting time, apparently. I didn't know that was a feature now.
So do you want to end this and start a new one?
Sure.
Okay. Send me another link and we'll be back.
Okay.
Part 2.
Hi, we are back. Okay, so
it's like a commercial break. Oh, we could stick a meetup commercial in there.
Yeah. Okay, so what kind of motivated you to run GDT? So after you got the hate mail, like what motivated you to continue this for the next 10 years?
Okay, to be clear, we ourselves did not make it go for 10 years. Other people were involved in that. We did make it go for how many years?
I stopped being editor in 98.
So I think I was there for longer because I stayed on and got my master's degree, and then I started teaching. So I think it was more than
I was still writing.
Yeah.
In 9.
But I was still helping with the
2000.
editing and
layout.
Yep.
So yeah, we weren't involved right until the end, but we were there for a while. What was our motivation? It was fun.
It was fun and it was enjoyable. Getting to know people in that context was a lot of fun. So it was a social activity in a way, and the publication was an aside to that in a way.
Gracies Dinnertime Theater, because of the way we would put it together and because of the topics that we would write about, ended up being a psychological filter, that there would be a certain type of personality that wanted to get involved in helping with that. And that was a great way to meet people that we got along with, because it already filtered out.
Yeah, there were so many people that were just out of hand, hated it.
Yeah. Yeah.
Some people thought we were evil and
yeah. But yeah, I had an immense amount of fun doing it. And it
was mostly meeting the people and doing things with them.
And it taught, and so I'm going to say some things that other people told me, other illustrators. After Mark Chepla was
Vinny Bove.
But some other illustrators and other people who wrote, they said that because of our strict weekly deadline, that we were very, very strict, that we were going to hit our deadline no matter what, because I was pissed off about how the reporter would miss deadlines and stuff. So one of the things that we really strove for was that we were going to hit our deadlines no matter what. So because of that, everybody had to get their stuff done. Illustrators, multiple illustrators, would later say to me that because of that, that actually helped them with their academics at RIT, because they needed to prioritize things. They needed to organize themselves and their work schedules and such in a way that they wouldn't have done by themselves. And at least for me, the weekly writing and layout of Gracies Dinnertime Theater, it showed me that if you want to write, then
you can do it.
Then write.
Yeah, all you need to do is just write. It doesn't have to make a lot of sense all the time. As long as you keep trying, something will come out.
And sometimes, again, because of the weekly deadlines, sometimes you gotta throw the ink at the page and then move on. It's not great.
Not everything is a perfect snowflake.
Right. But at least it can be legible.
You're gonna keep going on that.
Oh man, their layout was terrible.
Okay. So what was your inspiration? So Gracie's Dinnertime Theater has like a very kind of unique satirical style. I guess in a modern sense, people kind of label it as like politically incorrect. So what kind of like interested you in like writing in like such a satirical, like don't care about like social norms kind of way?
That's mostly my fault, I think. I loved dark satire. So I loved Jonathan Swift and Shakespeare. He's a satirist. And Terry Pratchett. I was the one who introduced Sean to Terry Pratchett. He never involved himself with that at all. And they all sort of shaped how we would write things and how. So, you know, A Modest Proposal is a really good background for the kinds of things we would write.
Yeah, absolutely. Because Modest Proposal is exactly what I was talking about. You take a logical idea and you keep expanding upon it until it's horrible logical conclusion.
So I think my sense of lunacy and dark humor is where most of the satire was grounded from.
Yeah, I absolutely agree with that. That definitely set the tone. But we ended up, I would argue that we ended up having a very distinct style.
Yeah, we did, but it started from
early on, rough. Holy crow, was it rough? But by the time we were using phrases like a sperm whale's nightmare and things like that.
This sounded like a sperm whale's nightmare.
Yeah. We
to this day, I was giggling to myself about the what was it? Not since McCarthy has there been that much alliteration. That is one of my favorite lines ever.
Terror birds in the Midwest. Yeah, I mean, we hit our stride, I think, at around that time period. We developed definitely our own style.
Okay. And was that like one of the like main contributing reasons as to why a lot of people disliked Gracie's Dinnertime Theater, or was it?
I'm sure. I think Sean had a nickname.
I did indeed.
Yeah, and so people thought we were serious when we weren't. So yeah. Do you want to elucidate on your nickname?
All right. So there was a project. I was in the biotechnology program at RIT. And there was a project that my group and I were working on at the time period. This was at the time when the Human Genome Project had not quite been completed yet. So the project was on the Human Genome Project. And as a part of the project, I was arguing that this could eventually lead to a curing of genetic diseases and things like that. And this led to a in-class discussion of eugenics. And somebody accused me of being a eugenicist, and I agreed. I said, yes, I am absolutely a eugenicist. And because of that, I ended up with the nickname Little Hitler. So that willingness to embrace an extreme logical conclusion endeared us to some people and was a huge
bone of contention for
Yeah.
others.
Yeah.
Okay, so I'm guessing a main figure that had a lot of contention with you was probably RIT's administration under then President Al Simone. So I'm curious as to like the issues you like faced from RIT's administration.
Al Simone did not like us at all.
Okay, so he did not like us, but we had very little direct contact with Al Simone. Anything that was being done to try and deter things that Gracie's Dinnertime Theater was trying to do on campus, it was done through a third party. So it would be done through somebody not Al Simone, but we had people in the administration who were on our side, and they would
tell us stories.
Yeah, they would let us know that you're going to run into problems trying to do this because Al Simone doesn't want you, blah blah blah. And you know, in a couple weeks, as we're trying to do the thing, then somebody else is letting us know that we can't do it, or they would wait until the last minute just before we were going to do some activity on campus and let us know that, oh no, you can't do it because there's all this paperwork that you failed to fill out, and so on. So yes, we have secondhand information saying that Al Simone did not particularly care for us and really wanted us to go away. But we don't have direct feedback. I only met with Al Simone once. It was after we were editors and after what I think of as the second age of GDT. Later on, GDT got in trouble for something they published, and they needed to go and talk to Al Simone.
Is this after me?
Yeah, this is after you.
I don't remember this.
And I went in as sort of the equivalent of the friend of the court. I went in to help represent Gracie's Dinnertime Theater from the perspective of copyright and freedom of speech and some things like that. He was actually, I thought, quite professional when I met with him, but I also don't think he expected there to be a non-student present for the whole thing.
Any like specifics of what or like, can you go into some like GDT controversies or like other like controversial events?
We tried to have a road race one year. We were going to have the 3.14 easy as pie road race It was going to be 3.14 miles. And yeah, we received word that the administration was absolutely not going to let us do that. And that was an example of last minute them saying, oh no, there's all this paperwork that you didn't fill out, so you're not going to be able to do it. So it was like 3 or 4 days before we were going to have the road race that it got canceled.
Tried to have a speaker come.
Yeah,
That could have been because of him, though.
Who, Harlan Ellison?
Harlan Ellison, yeah.
Maybe.
He's a little caustic.
We were going to invite Harlan Ellison to come to RIT to speak. I spoke with him on the phone, and he was like,
He
yeah.
was very excited.
He was like, yeah, I'd love to. It's been a long time since I've been to sort of central-ish New York. Let's do it. And he was reducing his fee because it had been a while since he'd been there. But yeah, student government ended up not being okay with that.
They invited Bill Maher instead.
Yeah, they invited Bill Maher instead of the late great Harlan Ellison. Let's see, what else was there?
There's of course there's grant stuff. When they found out about the grant, trying to make sure they didn't give that to us.
Oh yeah, when they found out that Gracies Dinnertime Theater was receiving money from the Creative Arts Committee.
There was a lot of finagling going on there. We started getting ads and other things to help support us when they were trying to get rid of our grant money.
Yeah.
At one point, we were so flush with grant money, we realized we had enough to print a book.
Yeah, we published a book with that grant money.
We printed what we called the People's Glorious Big Red Book,
Hi-ya!
which is in the Library of Congress.
Yes.
And was sold at Barnes and Noble only because we stuck it in their bin and they didn't know. And some of our friends actually picked it up and bought it.
Yeah, I would go into Barnes and Noble and just put books in Barnes and Noble. So yeah.
How many copies did you print?
That was 2,000 copies of the Big Red Book.
I think so.
I think it was 2,000. We still have a few.
Yeah, we still have some.
Wow.
And I'm pretty sure RIT's library has one in the archives. RIT library at one point had an archive of a lot of Gracies Dinnertime Theater stuff. I don't know how complete it was, and I don't know if it included like all the other Hell's Kitchen stuff. But yeah, they had an archive, and I know that they had a copy of the Big Red Book at one point.
Okay.
But
the Big Red Book was made to be a sort of best of the best of whatever we'd printed. It was thrown together, I think, on 2 weekends.
Yeah.
It was a mess.
We had a bunch of money left over on the grant, and it was a use it or lose it thing. And we were like, well, we're going to use it.
Let's make a book.
Let's make a book. There were controversies about what was published a couple times. Like one time we called the head editor of the Reporter a meddling little trollop. That didn't go over so well.
Then our head editor was from then on always referred to as the meddling little trollop.
Yep. That
became a title for our editor.
That was the official name of the editor for Gracies Dinnertime Theater for a while. Let's see, what else? Controversies. There was actually a controversy, and you might have to go back and talk to some of the previous presidents of CSH. So Gracies Dinnertime Theater was housed on the CSH servers.
The first website was made by somebody who was in CSH just on a whim.
Yeah.
He made the first website for us back in 1995. And then we started
it like early 95.
Yeah, it was very, very early. And then we started upkeeping things, and we were allowed to work on CSH. They let us work in the ARG room.
Yeah.
And there was a lot that would go on there. And they gave us a place to stash our
equipment
and things.
all of our military service manuals and
They let
things like that.
us put our internet archive up on CSH. So CSH was very important to Gracie's Dinnertime Theater to that extent.
But what eventually happened was CSH got some pressure from the administration at RIT. You can't have Gracie's Dinnertime Theater on CSH. So by that point, thankfully, we had already secured hellskitchen.org. So we had our own place to put things. So to this day, the sort of shell of Hell's Kitchen and Gracie's Dinnertime Theater still on CSH, but it's just the shell.
If you
doesn't
click on
go
anything,
anywhere.
it's 404 not found.
Yeah. But yeah, that was because of administration pressure put on CSH at the time period, which I totally get. I mean, CSH can't endanger its standing and position on the campus just for
A silly little publication.
yeah, just for a bunch of meddling little trollops.
Yeah.
Were there any other connections to Computer Science House that you had during your time at GDT?
Many people who were members of GDT were also members of CSH. So Adam Fletcher and Rory was
I think
at CSH.
Rory
right?
was CSH.
And then so Rory Kirshner, and he would come. He didn't really do anything. He came and looked at all of our books, and then he said he liked them and he left. Then there was Matt Weaver.
Was Matt in CSH?
He was in Art House too. I think he
Yeah.
was somewhat affiliated with CSH.
Sean Stanley.
Sean Stanley. He was sort of tertiarily related.
And we would have people from CSH contributing like
Yeah.
little articles or what have you. But yeah, there was a lot of overlap between CSH and RIT during that. I mean, not RIT, it is CSH and GDT during that time period.
Especially when we were doing, so there was a period of time where we were doing the main articles and doing all the editing on the CSH floor.
Yeah, in the ARG room.
And so people would be passing by, and we would be having conversations all the time. So a lot of people were in and out, and there, of course, as it was such a random thing where we're throwing anything at the wall to see what sticks, I'm sure there was lots of influence from the people around us.
Yeah. That I can only speak from like 95 to 2000-ish. Beyond that, I wasn't involved with writing or editing in GDT beyond 2000.
The people who took over after Sean were largely from CSH
and then
background.
And then I believe there were 2 editors after that.
Yeah,
and
they were not.
I don't think they were.
Yep.
Were there similar this is more to Kelly, but were there similar connections with Art House?
Not so much, no. On the art side of things, we just kept being told that our layout and design was horrible.
Yeah.
So none of them wanted to have anything to do with us.
Yeah. Yeah, we didn't know what we were doing. We were self-taught.
Yeah, we were just doing it ourselves.
I looked at the reporter and said, okay, we're never doing that. And then we figured it out. We started out using Quark Express and then later on transitioned to InDesign, and yeah.
Okay, so I think like if you look on like places like Wikipedia or RITpedia or like other like kind of similar websites, anytime they mention GDT, they say that GDT is most known for its articles on RIT's connection to the CIA. Many, I think, link back to the specific article, "The Politics of High Damnation."
Nation, yeah.
Yeah. And I'm curious as to why this specific thing is what what people perceive as Gracie's Dinnertime Theater biggest contribution or legacy thing.
Well, Sean keeps writing that, so I think that helps.
No.
But other people have written it too. Now, so that article was written by Ali Zaidi.
Mm-hmm.
They contacted us and asked if we would consider putting their article in, and their article was amazing.
Yeah, the article was excellent.
So we said sure, and we printed it. And I think we reprinted it in the Big Red Book.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, there's a whole section in the Big Red Book just about the CIA.
Yeah.
RIT CIA.
We did a little bit of RIT CIA, but it wasn't as extensive as that. I mean, it was mostly this article by Ali Zaidi, and it was just one article. It was an excellent article. And I think it was one of the first times we had somebody from outside getting a hold of us and saying, I have this article, would you be willing to publish it?
This is roughly around the same time period, and I'm embarrassed to say I can't remember his name. The guy who was sending us personal accounts of what was going on in the Serbian war. Remember?
That sounds familiar.
It was like, nope, I can't remember his name, but he was in Serbia at the time. And every week he would send us essays about what it was like to be in Serbia during the war in the 1990s, late 90s. So there was a time period where GDT was publishing things that, I mean,
were serious,
legitimate journalism.
Yeah,
like
it surprised us as much as anybody.
Yeah. So I think one of the reasons the article, Politics of High-Tech Damnation, I think the reason that resonated so much at the time was, one, there were the funding for CIAS, the School of American Crafts, that it was being cut by the administration.
Yeah, and it was being cut in large part because at some point, almost all of the departments and schools within RIT got a lot of funding from the CIA. This includes the School for American Crafts. They would have strange little projects where they would need to stick secret compartments in desks,
furniture,
in the furniture and other things of this sort around.
We're not making this up.
This is real. These were
real.
I've
done a lot of research into CIA connection. It goes deep.
Yeah, it does.
Yeah, it goes real deep.
It goes as, so I had a job while I was at RIT working for facilities. I was helping make electronic maps of all the floor plans of all the buildings and such. And I was speaking with one guy who had been there since the school was built. And he was like, well, you know why the quads are built the way they are, right? Where the I don't know how much the campus has changed, but from one quad to another, when you're moving from like the quad of Saul to the different quads for the major buildings,
you're mostly enclosed.
Though, yeah, you're enclosed. There are narrow openings that you can put a truck in and it will block that off.
So it was for crowd control.
It was intentionally built, so I was told by this person in facilities at the time, who was there when the campus was being built, when it was first being constructed, when they were draining the swamp. They were constructed for crowd control.
But so what had just happened shortly before we got to RIT was that all this, so the CIA had been sending a lot of money into the school. And so that's what kept places like the School for American Crafts alive and well. But the money had dried up because the student body had tried to kick the CIA off of campus. Now, it wasn't entirely successful because the CIA and the NIA, no, not that. A lot of defense organizations in the
DARPA.
government, they recruit heavily from RIT still. They did it for years. They were doing it while we were there.
Yeah, absolutely.
And so the money was drying up. So what was happening at the School for American Crafts, where all of the programs were being cut drastically. They removed the textiles department altogether, and they said, oh, it's going to be the same thing. It's just going to be better. That's what they kept telling us as they were downgrading everything. So on my part, as far as the administration goes, there was a great deal of bitterness because they were trying to get rid of our programs altogether. I was in the ceramics department, and that was one of the healthier programs. Yeah. But they were still trying to cut as much of the art schools as they could.
And I think, so there's that, and that's why I think it resonated at the time. It ended up really angering the administration. The publication of that really angered the administration because there were no lies in it. We can't be accused of making anything up, publishing lies, but it made RIT look bad. It made RIT look really bad. Oh well. Do a better job.
Yeah, on that front, I don't think much has changed in like the 20 years. So is like that article kind of what like what you think is like the single most important article that GDT has published?
It is certain. I mean, a lot of our articles are kind of flippant and silly. This was not flippant and silly. As far as what is important, it was important. The definition of a flitterbick is not important in comparison.
Right.
So yeah. There
were a couple other articles, some articles where there was research done. It was there were true pieces of journalism that were done, talking about, who was on the board for RIT and what were they involved in, where do they make their money, that kind of thing. But that the people that are on the board come and go. The legacy of CIA's involvement at RIT is something that lasts beyond changes to board. So I think that, I do think that that's probably the most influential and important thing GDT published.
Okay.
And I always felt that Dan Newland was a plant.
We had a person who was helping out with GDT who was also working at the Reporter at the time. So he would give us information about what the Reporter is doing and how the editor at the time was incoherent with rage about something that we published.
Often, yes.
But the person, Dan Newland, specifically said he was interested in working for the CIA. So on our lists of people that were helping out, we just referred to him as Damn.
Okay. Are there any other articles that you are especially proud of that were published?
Oh, there
were a lot of enjoyable ones. I was told by Dan that it is impossible to write an article in the second person, and I proved him wrong.
Yes.
With Driving with Baptists.
Yeah. So I would say Driving with Baptists is one of my favorites. The article about the universe, the Squirrel Saga is another good one. I think that one's called Universe. The one talking about radioactive money.
Yep.
That one I think is a really good one. There are things beyond the main articles that I thought were good too. We would have weekly columns that people would do.
Every once we were trying to start up a column for a little while, which is still one of my favorite ideas, called History for Dyslexics, where you take multiple historic things that have occurred, or personages or other things, and you mix them up, like Teddy Roosevelt and FDR. And so you make the lifespan of this one person out of a multitude of things.
Yep.
We had, what was it, the Hindenburg and
the Hindenburg, and I don't remember.
We mixed up the Hindenburg disaster.
It wasn't the Challenger. That was too soon.
Was it the Titanic?
Oh yeah. It was the Titanic.
Yeah, so we mixed up the Hindenburg disaster with the Titanic, and we made a history for dyslexics. And that's something that sits with me, and it makes me every once in a while want to make more history for dyslexics, because it's such a good idea.
We still have a list
Yeah.
of ideas that we never did.
Yeah, we still have the bare bones of articles sitting around somewhere.
Like somewhere there was a mostly finished draft talking about Mall of America, where it's a mall that stretches along the entirety of the southern border of the United States. That nothing says border security like a giant strip mall. But that, it's not quite done. It never saw the light of day. And this was way before President Trump and his build the wall thing. This was, a decade
This was
before
build them all.
They build them all.
Mhm.
Yeah, this was a decade before he was talking about that.
Okay. It's time for another commercial break.
Awesome.
I love Zoom. Okay, see you in a minute.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Back. Ms. Gunter will be right back. She is pouring herself and me some tea.
Okay, we can wait.
Oh no, we can keep going. She can hear us.
Oh, okay. Which articles were like the most fun to write? Was it the more like just crazy satire ones, or like the more like serious kind of more journalistic ones, or just like somewhere between?
It
depended. Each article had its own book.
The
universe one, it came about because of an argument about what would happen if you placed two squirrels at the beginning of the universe before anything else existed, with flashlights in their mouths, and would they be able to see each other coming?
Yeah,
Because they'd be speeding at the speed of light towards one another. And so just the absurdity of considering the physics of two squirrels with flashlights hurtling at each other at astronomical speeds was a good time when you're mixing up satire and science and all sorts of other things.
So I mean, the articles that we mentioned as being some of our favorites, really what it came down to was what was the camaraderie at the time when we were making these things. Because sometimes if you got the right group of people together, people who were willing to play with ideas in a certain way, it was just delightful. It was, it felt like magic at times. That it ended up less being about, is this high literature? And it was more about the process. Are we doing things that we are enjoying? Because ultimately with GDT, that's what it came down to. Are we enjoying this?
So do you have a favorite article?
Kelly, do you have a favorite article? Is it Driving with Baptists?
Driving with Baptists, because it was so absurd. And the fact I was told I couldn't make a second person article.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So driving with Baptist is quite good. Do I have a favorite article?
I also liked the fact, the thing that made us really push ourselves a lot early on was Religious Marathon Week, in which we had to have a working, we
published every day.
We published every day of a week. 1 page of new material, and it started out with an article that was written from a research paper I had done into the early Christian church.
And oh yeah, that article really set the tone for using footnotes too.
Yeah, it did.
That's where we got that motif.
The fact that I took a research article and I was having so much fun writing the research article, we decided to turn it into a GDT with a little modification. We didn't just plunk my research article into the whole thing, but yeah, that was a good article. That one was fun.
And hugely influential on format of what we would do in the future. I do have favorite articles, but it has been so long that I can't tell you the names.
There were so many.
Yeah. Yeah, we published hundreds of articles.
And we didn't just do articles. We would also do like visual things. We did a whole series of just horrible
oh, the racist one.
We had an entire volume dedicated to being racist about everything. But it was like everybody's. So we even had we made an advertisement for
the Whopper. Do it my way.
we had a Burger King ad with Home of the Whopper, and we had a picture of Benito Mussolini saying "Do it my way." We had Raid kills wasps dead talking, and we had that angled towards white Anglo-Saxon Protestants, and we were all over the place. It was everything we did in there was designed to be horrible.
It was a really horrible episode.
But we tried not to leave anybody out.
The rider cards were really good.
The rider cards were fun.
We had an illustrator who was just phenomenal.
Scott Peterson.
The amount of detail that he would do. And so we came up with this idea of tarot cards for GDT, and we ended up calling them rider cards. Rider
of the Apocalypse cards. I was the person who would come up with the ideas and the various stats on the cards, and I would give those to Scott, and while he was also illustrating our main articles, he would illustrate the rider cards, and they were beautiful.
I still have all those originals. They are gorgeous. The amount of detail, the reproductions that we ended up printing were necessarily not as good.
In a little way, you need to think of like the Garden of Earthly Delights in the small, tiny details all over the image.
Yeah, there was just a lot of small stuff that he put in to make us laugh. He wouldn't tell us about it, but there would be all these little Easter eggs in the images specifically for us to see. Those were really, really beautiful.
GDT was never just about, we also made like a cereal for the religious right called Just Right. There were a lot of making the advertisements were fun. We had one with Mao Zedong and Coca-Cola saying "Bite the wax tadpole."
Yeah, I remember
because
that
that's
one.
what Coca-Cola translates as in Chinese. So there were. I enjoyed doing the visualization stuff too. That was fun playing with Photoshop.
Yeah.
Okay. Are there any cool or funny stories of just stuff that has happened during GDT's publications? Like, I don't know, like printer breaking down or something, or alongside something like that?
Let's see. There was one time we were in one of the computer labs, or yeah, it was in one of the computer labs at RIT, and we just couldn't get the thing to print. We couldn't get our things to, our master stuff to print out that we could then use to make copies. And it was really stressing me out because we had a deadline. I had to hit this deadline, and the computer lab was getting ready to close. And the person who's running the computer lab, you know, they've got better things to do with their life. They're not going to wait for me. And then when they came over and they saw what I was doing, and they were like, "Oh, you're doing GDT?" They stuck around an extra 20 minutes. They closed the computer lab, and they ended up helping me get that all printed out. This is before we actually had our own printer and such. But
That was a revelation.
But yeah, they stuck around and helped out.
Yeah.
There are lots of funny stories, but I'm frankly not gonna share a lot of those stories because
I remember
yeah, I'm not gonna share some of those stories.
driving Dan back from Sherwood Ave to RIT campus one time. We would go along East River Road, and it was wet out. There was like a light rain going, and it's pitch black outside, and there's these things all over the road. I'm like, what is this stuff all over the road? I don't know what this is. And then I suddenly think, I look at him like, oh my God, it's frogs. And Dan is like, no, those aren't frogs. And then as he says that, one of them jumps up just to get hit by the tire. So it goes crunch right over the frog. And we realized the entire road is covered in relatively small frogs.
And there's nothing you can do.
Hundreds of them. I've already driven over God knows how many. There's more, so many more, and there's no way to get off the road without running over frogs. That would be one story.
When we were expanding in Rochester and we were reaching out to other satire publications at other universities, there were interesting interactions where, like, for example, when we were meeting with the Norm at the University of Rochester, I thought we were just going to be meeting with like the head editor. No, it was the entire writing staff. So the Norm would be published once a semester or like once a year. I don't remember. But yeah, it was the entire writing staff that was there. And the head editor for the Norm at the time was clearly taking a superior position to GDT and sort of making fun of our budget. And they were like, what would you do with our budget? And we were like, we would publish more. What are you talking about? we would publish more. We ended up stealing some of their writers. Their writers would end up working for
Michelle?
One of our sister. No, Claire.
Oh, Claire was at the Norm.
Yeah,
Oh,
Claire started out.
fabulous.
Claire started out as one of the writers for the Norm, but we kept stealing people from the Norm because the Norm didn't want to play with us. And so one of our sister publications, the Melancholy Predator, morphed into the Melancholy Homewrecker, and the Melancholy Homewrecker ended up being published based on the University of Rochester, but would get co-published with GDT under Hell's Kitchen.
We would have the document, and on one side we would have GDT, and on the far side, on the other side, would be Melancholy Homewrecker.
Yep.
So that, you know, you could start out with the Melancholy Homewrecker, you could start out with the GDT, and you would have both of them in the document. But we had something at MCC too.
And then Rutgers.
And Rutgers, nowhere near Rochester at all.
Yeah, down in New Jersey.
What was the quote that person said about GDT and Rochester?
Oh, how there was an increase in missing children at around the time that GDT started to be found in stores throughout Rochester. Draw your own conclusions, something like that.
I had a friend, well, one of my parents' friends bought a big red book
Mhm.
at Barnes and Noble and didn't realize she had seen it. She just picked it up and randomly she brought it up to the counter and asked how much it was. And they looked at it. They had no idea. So they just put a number on it and gave it to her. And then she hadn't even noticed that until she opened it up and started reading it, that she knew somebody who wrote for it.
Yeah, and then she was like, "Hey, can you sign this?" But yeah, what I'm trying to think, what are some other
I got
stories?
fan letters from prison
Yeah.
and from Israel.
Yep.
Apparently there were people reading us online and they sent fan letters and pictures of their feet.
So this is not this is not a brag. This is, as far as I can tell, true. GDT was one of, if not the first, satire publication from a university that had a website.
Yeah.
Really early on, when we first, it was like right after we got the hate mail, and this was before Religious Marathon Week, when we sort of proved to ourselves that we could write forever. But I was concerned that if we were going to do this long term and publish on a weekly basis, I couldn't imagine us being able to crank out material. So I started looking up as best I could. At the time, Yahoo was the only aggregate on the web for finding things. So I looked up as many satire publications as existed that I could find at different universities around the country. And I sent out probably 30 or 40 emails to different satire publications saying, "Hey, I have this idea for a Associated Press of satire publications. And would you be interested in
Rutgers said yes.
Well, only because of the iconoclast.
Yeah.
We never heard back from anybody else, but that idea of an Associated Press for satire that was the underlying thing for Hell's Kitchen. And then once we found the Independent Press Association, we joined immediately. We joined UWire when it was on, and UWire is what led one of our articles to be published in USA Today. So yeah, I mean, 1997, 1998, that might have been peak in terms of reach. We
were all over the place. We had nonprofit status. Sean had written up a organizing document for our nonprofit status, and they said this is fine for a frivolous.
So the IRS, this is to get 501c3 status for Hell's Kitchen, you needed to have an organizing document. Whatever. So I submit it. It comes back rejected, saying, as Kelly was saying, that this is a fine thing this is a frivolous organizing document. Redo it.
So she retitled the next document the Fodfuck Impala, which stood for Far From Frivolous Organizing Document.
But I forget what the Impala
I don't remember what the Impala was.
But the Fodfuck was the Far From Frivolous Organizing Document. And, I named it and then put parentheses Fodfuck next to it. So throughout the entire document, I referred to it as the Fodfuck. And they approved that. So if anybody ever says that the IRS does not have a sense of humor, they're lying, because clearly they do, because I changed nothing but the title and they were like, yeah, all right. Let's go.
Okay, so aside from publishing articles, what type of events did GDT host, or what type of things on campus did GDT participate in? You kind of started to talk about it with the road competition and the speaker, but were there any other physical on campus stuff that you did?
Generally speaking, that's where the administration came in. They didn't want us doing anything on campus. So
we would sometimes set up a table and hand out issues.
Yeah.
We got kicked, well, yeah,
We got
early
kicked
on.
out of Gracie's.
Early on, we got kicked out of Gracie's.
So we went right in front of Gracie's and handed them out there.
Yeah, so that people would end up taking them into Gracie's, and that
Yeah,
wasn't
and
our
then they started yelling at us, and we said we didn't bring them in there.
Yeah,
So
not my fault. I didn't bring them in there.
we can't help it what other people do.
Pizza sales
Yeah, we did
and
pizza
Cafe
sales.
Diablo.
Oh yeah, there was a coffee made with chocolate, chamomile, and
Coffee, brown sugar.
vanilla. It is
really
a ride.
rich. It is a biochemical
calming-
ride.
It is calming and exciting all at the same time. We sold that for a while.
Yeah, in order to raise money to help with publication.
And t-shirts, but for the most we
We did May Day.
We did the May Day, that's right.
We did May Day.
We did a maypole, we did a May Day celebration. One of the people who were writing for GDT Attic Inferno had a giant trailer put on RIT in front of the photo building.
Yeah.
With paper mache trailer people in it.
Yep.
And people were encouraged to just come visit the trailer. And she used to live in the attic.
Of the place I was living, renting at the time.
She wrote a series of articles called Attic Inferno. But we did some things with her.
Well, honestly, she didn't write anything. I just handed her a tape recorder.
That's right.
I handed her a tape recorder and it was stream of consciousness, and then I would transcribe it.
Yeah.
It'd be way easier today. I would just use Whisper and it would just be, like
it would transcribe.
Yeah,
right away.
it would be, man, that would be awesome today. But yeah, it was just this stream of consciousness. I don't even remember if there was punctuation when we published it.
But a lot of the time when we
was
tried to do things, we were not really allowed to. We would have
story contest.
We had story contests.
We had the annual Halloween story contest.
We had, yep, and that was good.
Mhm.
We also had, we UU encoded, we had a contest where we UU encoded a sound.
Yeah, one of the things I am interested in general is shoving things into the wrong boxes. So we were at the time, because this was before the internet, how do we publish sound? So we took an audio file and we UU encoded it, and we published the entire printed out UU encoded file. And then somebody OCR'd it, scanned it, and
into a
OCR'd
contest, and we had for people to figure out what it said, and they would win. I don't remember what they were winning.
I think a
It
t-shirt.
was probably a t-shirt. Jeremiah won that.
Uh-huh.
But the sound file that it was I'm a bear, and which actually came from the head article in that issue. So we kept getting message after message, like 5 minutes apart, from Jeremiah giving in a new suggestion for what it actually was, until he finished reading the article and said, "Oh, I'm a bear."
We had the Rube Goldberg contest.
The Rube Goldberg contest, where we had people build Rube Goldberg machines.
We had the literary scavenger hunt.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Um,
I've forgotten about a bunch of these.
yeah. So, I mean,
not things where we have an actual position on campus, because the campus didn't like that too much, but we did involve ourselves a bit.
if we were physically going to do something, we would just do it.
Because then they couldn't stop us.
Right. And so like selling pizza and coffee or something like that, we would just set up a table and do it. And we would hand out issues at the same time. So that was sort of the extent of the things that we would do on campus. But we had lots of contests.
There was, we would meet on campus to talk about articles or editing. There would be meetings in which people would watch a movie while folding issues.
Yeah, or the printer.
They were called the printer demons.
Printer demons. Yeah, we would have printer demons who would help us prepare the issues, because they would get printed, but then we needed to fold them.
Yeah, you had to fold hundreds of issues, and then they would also take like a stack and hand them out at different places.
Yeah.
So how popular or influential was GDT specifically at RIT during its runtime?
Oh, I don't know how to answer that.
I have no clue actually, but I knew a bunch of people at various points who had seen it. Like I said, a lot of the people in the art school disdained it because it looked like crap.
I kept telling them, okay, then come help us.
Help us, and they wouldn't. But
Like would it becomes like a thing where people would recognize you as editors of GDT?
generally speaking, for the most part, they didn't. I don't think they thought I was recognized on campus anyway. So if they knew that, that would just be one more thing to add to my list.
So in terms of like recognition, like walking down the quarter mile or something, no, because we never published really in paper, never published our photos. The only photo that existed was buried on the infrequently asked questions
And
page.
for me, it was a child's photo
Except for the image
of us
the
standing,
logo.
but that's not a good photo.
Yeah.
You can't tell what I look like in that.
That it's intentionally
Yeah, I did
it's
that on
intentionally
purpose.
low quality. So yeah, we were absolutely known to some people. Like there was, at one point I was publishing a weekly column. In addition to main articles and all that, I had a weekly column called Fey Denizen. And yeah, somebody was like enamored with the whole idea and wanted to meet me over lunch to talk about fairies for some reason.
I remember the janitor at the art building knew very well. He got one of our t-shirts, and unfortunately that one didn't print out well.
The blind screwing cockroaches.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah.
What was it? Support nuclear testing and make the world safe for blind screwing cockroaches.
Yep. So I don't think we had a lot of recognition. Like people wouldn't know who we were.
My problem, I think, in large part was that I had too much recognition outside of GDT that they weren't going to know that from anything else.
I will say that when I was TAing at the graduate level, one of the other TAs was from RIT, and she did not know my name, but somehow the topic of Gracies Dinnertime Theater came up, and she knew what Gracies Dinnertime Theater was. So at least as of like 2009, somebody had gone through RIT, and they didn't know me, but they knew Gracies Dinnertime Theater.
My parents had a lab tech from RIT, and she knew about GDT as well. And all the silly stories about me.
So yeah, we were well known in a certain group of people, but I think the larger campus, we were not known. But
they didn't have a face to put to us.
But if you flashed the logo, then I think a lot of people would have known what that was.
Okay. Was there anything you did not enjoy about GDT or the process of writing it?
I didn't like our reliance on the grant.
Yeah, that's why we were going for other monetary sources.
I wish we could have diversified our funding stream.
We did diversify sometimes.
Yeah.
We were able to do some.
It was still like 80-20. I mean, it was.
Yeah, but we had worked a lot of it out. I mean, initially it was just out of pocket for us. Yeah. We were paying for it ourselves. So we always felt like we could go back to that.
What did
I think sometimes people just they would say they were going to do something and they wouldn't. So sometimes it would feel like pulling teeth if people had been promising articles that they never delivered on.
Yeah.
That got a little old sometimes.
When we found a good core group to work with, it was just magic
smooth
and smooth.
And then sometimes you would have people who really want to be involved, but don't know how to put the time in for it.
They were aspirational. Honestly, I can't think of anything that I disliked.
It was
about
a fun
the
process. Yeah, it was enjoyable, and I didn't mind using my time that way.
Yeah, I learned a lot of valuable skills.
I learned a lot.
And
now I know I can write about anything.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, I guess overall for me it comes down to I wanted GDT, and by extension Hell's Kitchen, to be more financially stable, less dependent on the grant, because I knew exactly what would happen eventually. That when the grant went away, then if people are not personally invested in it, then it's going to go away. It needed to have a permanent revenue source, which is, I mean, the article that was written in the Democrat and Chronicle basically said exactly that.
Yeah.
So at the peak, while you were still working, how many people did you have working alongside you? And how was it like managing so many like people, editors, artists, and whatnot?
So we had a unwritten rule that we didn't want to have more than around 7 people in a room at a given time.
We had more than 7 people working on an issue where they were working on other articles.
Right.
So main issue, we wouldn't have more than like 7 people in it.
Right.
Because it would get too chaotic and difficult to run through.
Yeah, that's just a human psychology thing, that we wanted to keep it around 5 to 7 people in a room at a time.
But we had as many as like 10 or 12 people helping to work, make the entire thing, because at its peak we've been 36 pages long. GDT alone, just GDT,
not Melancholy.
And that was a week, 36 pages this week and 34 pages that week, and that was a lot of work.
Yeah, one of the reasons we started creating sister publications is so that we could increase coverage to other universities, but also to pull in other people and have it so that you don't have to manage more people, right? So you have other editors that are doing their own thing, publishing their own thing at their own university, but it all then gets aggregated into one thing, this idea of independent press of satire kind of thing. So yeah, I don't think we had more than 10 or 12 that we were working with on any given week.
Yeah,
but we would probably have 20 to 25 people where it comes out to be like
in and out over the course of like a quarter or so.
Yeah, so like 10 people that would be stringers. They would come in and then be a couple weeks before we hear anything, and then they'd come back.
Yeah, they would come in when they had the time, and they would not come in when they were too busy. And so it was constantly like this. But we always had sort of a core. Sean and I would always be there. We might have one other person.
Yeah.
Of always being there.
I liked it when we had people who would dedicate things so that we would have weekly columns. So you know what to expect. You pick up Gracies Dinnertime Theater and you know what to expect, that you flip in there, and somewhere in there's going to be a column by, I don't know, Michelle Amoruso, or
we had
something
Adam
by
Fletcher's
Sean Stanley, or the chess column, or
Sean Stanley's movie reviews,
or something on a weekly basis. And the weekly people, all I would have to do is, a couple days before deadline, I would just say, all right, where are we at? And they would come through, because by that point, I knew I could rely on them. I could trust them.
Okay. I think it's time for commercial break number 3.
All right.
We also
Okay, what were you saying?
Oh, but yeah, but that
No, I
doesn't,
guess
it doesn't
it's
really
still
have to do with,
I
it
know.
doesn't have to do with GDT. I mean,
Yeah.
it captures the
essence.
intent of it, but it's not GDT.
But there was the King Arthur thing. That was very GDT.
Yes. But I think out of scope.
Out of scope.
Okay, so next one is a double feature. I'm curious to learn more about what Hell's Kitchen and also about all of the related sister publications on Hell's Kitchen, because there's not much info online about them.
Well, okay.
This is more Sean's realm where
Yeah.
he was working with other groups.
Because I put together Hell's Kitchen and I ended up being the Susan for Hell's Kitchen. Susan is the official name for the role that ends up like being like secretary. So whoever is running Hell's Kitchen has the title of Susan. So early on, before Hell's Kitchen got started, we wanted this idea of having 5 to 7 people involved in the room at a given time. GDT was getting big. Like some meetings, we were getting like 10 or 12 people in a room. And it was getting unwieldy. So one of the people who I thought was really clever, really creative, BJ Leopold, I talked to him and said, how would you feel about starting a sister publication? And he was like, yeah, he was all over it. So that was the start of the Melancholy Predator. And they had their own staff and they did their own thing and we published together.
We were both on RIT campus.
Yes, we both publications were on RIT. It was made up entirely of students that were from RIT at that time. And then
until Claire
Turney and some other people associated with U of R joined the Melancholy Predator.
Yeah, Michelle was out of U of R as well.
Yeah, but she was with us.
Yeah,
she was ours.
He was obsessed with midgets.
So the Melancholy Predator evolved into the Melancholy Homewrecker and ended up being based on the University of Rochester. There are 2 sort of kind of sister publications that Kelly and I set up and ran, because in 97, I want to say, or maybe it was in 96, there was a satire section of the Reporter. And the person who was writing for it was actually really good. And I tried to steal them away, but to no effect. But they encouraged us to submit things to the Reporter. So we took old articles from GDT and we rewrote them and submitted them to the Reporter, got paid by the Reporter, and that money was then used to publish GDT.
The great cycle of life.
When the editor found out,
the editor hated us.
She was incandescent with rage that old GDT articles were being published in the Reporter and the Reporter was paying for them. So anyway,
that didn't last long.
Obviously. Yeah, that it initially was called 10-to-1 serial delusions, sorry, and then it ended up getting changed to Euclidean losers because they caught on to us. So we needed to change the name. That name serial, I really liked the idea of serial as a name, CEREAL, but playing on the idea of serially published things.
We were recruiting, so we had been dropping GDTs and such off at other campuses. We would drop them off at the U of R, we would drop them off at MCC. So we started getting calls from people at these other campuses,
Yeah.
and we met Brian Barrett.
Yep. And he ended up being the head editor of a publication called Serial that was based out of MCC, Monroe Community College.
He would help us with our head articles as well.
Yeah, he started out helping with GDT. And then once I was pretty sure that he had the chops for it,
He took over Serial.
Yeah, and he was given the MCC turf as his. The connection with University of Rutgers, there was a friend of ours who was impressed enough with GDT that they wanted to go back to their university and start something, which they called the Iconoclast. They recruited people, they started their own publication. So, and the way this all worked is not only would they publish their stuff there, but they would, I mean, this was cutting edge technology for the day. This is ridiculous. It makes me feel old, but PDFs were like a new thing. So they would put together a PDF of their content, send it to us. We would print it out and we would then publish it alongside, like a part of GDT.
So we had the overarching publication of Hell's Kitchen, and within it there was GDT, there was Melancholy, Predator, Homewrecker, there was
Serial.
Iconoclast, Serial Delusions. Those were all under the same cover.
So whenever their publication schedule came up, they would send us stuff and it would end up getting included. So there were a couple episodes of Hell's Kitchen that were long, like 50 pages long. They were big because they would include GDT, the Iconoclast, Serial, et cetera, all at once. It was, I thought, really impressive and cool.
Seeing as we started as 50 pages out of pocket.
So those are all the direct spin-offs that came out of GDT. And then there were other publications that asked to join. Once Hell's Kitchen was a thing, there were other publications that asked to join, like Piggy Lovin'. Piggy Lovin' was University of Texas. And there was a short-lived one, Evil.
That's
EVOL.
it. That's the one I was trying to remember.
EVOL was more of a traditional zine that was in Rochester. Trying to think if there's, I can't remember now. Those are the ones that I can remember off the top of my head. But the sister publications, the ones that GDT directly gave birth to, were Melancholy Predator, Melancholy Homewrecker, Serial, 10-to-1 Serial Delusions, Euclidean Losers, and Iconoclast.
Yeah.
So also on hellskitchen.org is Oscar Wilde comment.
Oh yeah, I am so sad that content is gone. It was this bizarre comic talking about Oscar Wilde being abducted by aliens, and because of relativistic changes in time, he gets abducted by aliens, and then when they return him, it's the future. So it's basically Oscar Wilde in the present day. I am really, really sad that content is now lost. I've even looked on like Internet Archive to try and find stuff, but no, it's just lost.
Okay, so let's see. Sort of nearing the end of my questions. We have 5 more. So after you left GDT, it carried on for a number of years, and then did it end due to the grant money running out, or due to a lack of will, or due to like a change of like culture or times?
Probably most of the above.
Yeah, I think it was actually really astute of you to list those 3, because I think those 3 are why it failed. I can't say for sure. I know the person who is the last editor of GDT. We're Facebook friends, and I actually needed to confer with them about a change of policy, because GDT didn't have a formal policy about right to be forgotten. And there was somebody who wanted their name removed from old issues of GDT online. And we had no policy on that, what to do. So he and I conferred about what to do. And we came up with a formal policy about right to be forgotten in terms of GDT.
Which is mainly that somebody who had their name on it in the past wanted to make sure that if somebody's looking up their name, it's not going to show up.
Yeah, they were concerned it could impact like their chances of being hired or whatever. So I know them, and I could give you contact information if you wanted to talk with them about the latter years of GDT and what happened at the end. I suspect what happened is that, and I can't be sure about this, but I suspect there was heavy reliance on grant money that was ultimately coming through RIT. So that meant, of course, that if RIT became unhappy with GDT in general, then they can cut it, that the money goes away, and as a consequence, the publication goes away.
When Sean and I were in charge, we were constantly doing fundraisers of one sort or another so that we could help pay for this. We weren't reliant on the university.
Right. Now, this is not meant to be a dig against the head editor or anybody that was involved with GDT at the end. But if
that's a good start. That's an excellent start.
Yeah, that's a great way. But based on how Kelly and I ran GDT during the first couple of years, if the grant money had gone away, GDT would not have gone away. It would have been much smaller, but we would have continued to publish it. We would have been paying for it out of our own pocket again, even if it was only 50 issues a week.
Because we were nothing if not pig-headed.
So I cannot say with certainty that GDT would have continued, but based on what I know about my personality, almost certainly it would have continued in paper form, not just electronic form.
Read as avarice. Hate-driven publication.
I cannot stab a flaming pencil into everybody's eye. Thus, I write.
So, do you think that GDT is a product of the time, or is it something that, like, for example, could start up again now in the current age? And if so, should it like be restarted by a new group?
I think it was very much a thing of its time.
It was absolutely a thing of its time, but that is not to say that it could not be restarted in this day and age. This is a perfect day and age to start.
Yeah, I mean, it turns out there's a lot that can be commented on now.
Yeah.
Now, keep in mind that from my perspective, GDT went through 3 phases. There was the phase and the format that Kelly and I used, and then there was a transitional period, and then toward the end of GDT, it was more of just a general publication that had articles in it.
Individual articles. You wouldn't have these group written articles.
Right. So when you're talking, GDT was around for 10 years. And most people at RIT, they're there for only 4-ish. So we're talking, 2.5 RIT generations. That's a long time for something to be around. So it changed a lot. So to say, could GDT be done today? Which GDT? Which form of GDT do you mean? I would also argue, myself, I am enamored with the physicality of paper. There is, for me, something special about the artifact in hand. But we live in an age,
digital age.
we live in a digital
It
age.
would be so, you would not have the oppressive amounts of monetary necessity that we had in GDT, where we had to have the money to print things out. If you just go all digital, you get rid of a lot of the problems that way.
I completely agree.
But you don't have the visibility
yes,
that you had.
and you don't have the how do I phrase this? The cult icon that you can center and fixate around, that there's a physical thing that you can hold and you can attach yourself to it. It's very different from looking at something on your phone, where you can swipe to the left and you're onto something else. You're onto something new. So I absolutely think that there's room for something like, I'm not saying GDT, but I'm saying something like GDT, because, and this is something I talk to my students in the classroom about. The role of the press is critical. That we live in an age where newsrooms are continually being downgraded, and there's not a lot of, honestly, not a lot of good investigative journalism, but there is an important role for reflective satire, looking deeply at what is going on, and not satire as in, haha, aren't I funny and goofy, look at me.
Like the report sent by the Onion to the Supreme Court.
Oh my God, it was so
the amicus
good.
brief by the Onion.
The amicus brief written by the Onion, sent to the Supreme Court, is, I think, is required reading. It is stunning how good it is.
It's really amazing.
We live in an age where reflection of what we do is important. Be that reflection of what is going on at the campus level, or be it reflection of what is going on at a state level, a national level, what have you. It's important.
So what do you think is the key to good satire?
Talking about things that make you uncomfortable.
I mean, there's a lot of ways to do that without being funny about it.
Well, yeah, but for Kelly and I have a very, very specific way of seeing the world.
Yeah.
And that absolutely comes through in GDT, that if you analyze the corpus of everything we read, you would have a pretty good sense of what our psychology and worldview is. But
there is a value in, especially in the world today, with climate change and the political proclivities of the nation, and either one way or another, there is a really important place for being able to look around you and laugh at a certain level of the absurdity, because there is nothing but absurdity surrounding us at this point, and there's a huge amount of gravity weighing down on us from school shootings and what's happening in Ukraine and what's happening in Taiwan. There's so many things going on in the world that are critically important, that will play a role.
Canada is on fire.
Canada's on fire. We had the pandemic. That we need to be able to laugh sometimes, even if what we're laughing about is horrible. We need a venue to let off some of the steam, but also we need to reflect in a different way, so that we can take in and change what we're seeing to something else.
And I would argue too that GDT is very much an artifact of its time. It's dated. Like
Very dated.
you read that stuff, and if you weren't there and like the mid 1990s, some of the stuff we're talking about is nonsense. It doesn't make any sense or whatever, but it captures that feel of the time.
It captures that time. Yeah.
So is there a place today for something like GDT?
Absolutely.
Yes. Should GDT be restarted? It was its own thing. I think it would be cool if somebody was like, hey, you know what? Gracie's Dinnertime Theater. Let's do that.
But I would say if someone wants to start up Gracie's Dinnertime Theater again, then they have to include something where Nebraska is spelled incorrectly.
Oh my God, yes.
Because we've been trying to get something on the wiki page.
Uh-huh. Yeah, we need there to be a way that we can put something on the official
shoehorn this into the Wikipedia page because we really want it there.
The location of Nebraska.
Are you too heavily involved in like editing the Wikipedia page of Gracies Dinnertime Theater?
Not us two.
Sometimes,
No.
I mean, I check on it every now and then.
Checks on it.
There was a time period where there was a little war going on in edits related to the sculpture, the Unity sculpture. But yeah, I check on it every now and then and make sure that it's, not being vandalized or whatever. So, most of what is there, I did not write.
Yeah.
Most of what is there, I did not write. I help out.
I still want to put Nebraska in there though. So if you see Nebraska in the Wikipedia page, that can be attributed to my desire to have Nebraska in there because, so the background on Nebraska is, I was looking up stuff on, it was something about gun statistics. And
it was like gun ownership
and some other information.
Yeah.
And for some incredibly, I was looking at gun laws in Nebraska. That's what the search parameter was. And for some incredibly insane reason, they had a picture in Wikipedia of the United States, and Nebraska was shaded a different color. And the caption underneath was location of Nebraska.
And it's just so funny.
That ever since then, I've wanted to have that on the Wikipedia page for GDT.
The location of Nebraska is so good.
And so we did put in things like, because there was all our notorious misspelling things. So at one point we put in like Nebraska, and they took that right out because we wanted to put location of Nebraska up.
Yeah.
So speaking on the Unity sculpture, it is, I think at this point, like fairly big a consensus that it is based on the GDT logo. And I know, Sean, you had a blog post that you linked me to that did say that some of the sculpture professors that you were close to during your time at GDT were in charge of making the sculpture. So
so let me
that needs
correct. Yeah, that needs clarification. I don't know the two people that were involved in making the sculpture.
They were there when our GDT emblem looked like that.
Yeah.
There was a morphology between the GDT symbol over the course of time. And there was one drawn specifically that was Scott Peterson.
Was that Scott? I don't think so.
Well, maybe it was. It might.
I think it was an illustrator after Scott.
Okay.
Anyway, the earliest version of the sculpture was made by Mark Chepla, and it was the three standing lines,
and then
the
and they're all straight.
And that general motif stuck around for a long time. There was a brief period of time where we thought about having a fourth one because we had a fourth person join GDT, but then they were like, oh, wait a minute, we're gonna have, like 12 lines eventually. So we stuck with the 3 with the angled line on the top. And that was the basic logo until I forget when the blog post says.
There were
It's
multiple
like,
times it was updated and stylized in new ways and
Yeah.
reformed. And one of the artists had a design. I was on RIT's campus a couple of months ago, and I walked by the Unity, it's the
Unity sculpture, yeah.
the Unity sculpture. And yeah, you can just see it when you're standing in the right place. You can see it.
I mean, look, the reality is, and I have reached out to one of the sculptors. I sent an email asking, could we talk? Because I'm really curious. The reality is, I don't know. But
the
holy
sculptors,
cow, it looks like the GDT logo.
the sculptors were there at RIT as students when GDT's logo looked like that.
I have such a hard time believing that they would not have seen an issue of GDT.
It was pretty well known at that point. That was sort of the height of GDT.
And the fact that it's referred to as Unity, that was kind of the meaning of that logo. That within our group, that logo took on the meaning of both change because of the slope at the top, but also unity, because we have to work together to get this shit published on a weekly basis. The fact that it's called Unity and just it looks like the GDT logo.
So if it is based on the GDT logo, why do you think that the sculptures potentially, like out of everything that they could use for a sculpture, why do you think that they specifically chose to represent GDT, allegedly?
Because GDT is cool.
There were a lot of people who enjoyed GDT. That we would have people contact us and give us notes about how it really warmed their cold hearts or whatever. But so I think for some people it held a very special place.
If I were a certain type of personality and I were asked to come up with a sculpture for RIT, and I knew that the administration disliked GDT, then that would be the ultimate way to slip something in, right? If I were of a certain personality.
That you actually are.
Right, but I can't read in. That's me. That's me. I don't know
If you have the exact same personality that you have right now.
But if I'm saying if the sculptor were so inclined.
Yes. Yeah.
Okay, so
you can't see, but Kelly has given me a look. She's like, yeah, uh-huh. So to summarize, it's totally the GDT logo.
But we have no proof of that.
Just look at it.
Okay, I have 3 last questions. So first one is, I don't know if either of you have kept up with RIT and like administrations or policies or whatnot after Al Simone. But like, has RIT gotten better or worse, or has it remained the same with its general kind of style of governing?
I honestly can't say.
We have a friend who works there.
Worked
there, and we've heard certain things every once in a while, but I don't think we've heard enough to really make an assessment.
That's really inside baseball stuff.
Yeah.
So I can't weigh in on that because clearly I'm no longer a student there. And even if I was, so much time has passed that I would expect it to be very different. RIT is on the semester system now instead of the quarter system.
That's going to change a lot.
There's been a huge investment in changing the feel of the campus, the architectural feel, the amount of greenery and plantings and the inclusion of sculptures.
So I was at RIT not too long ago. There's a push for people in the arts. There's a push for music. There's a push for working together between different groups, and the new building, or what is that they're making right now?
I don't know.
The shed.
Yeah, the shed. Yep, which yeah, the shed, which is about collaboration.
Are you going to take me out back and whip me with a stick out by the shed?
So there's a collaboration between different types of fields that it seems to be emphasizing. When we were there was a huge push for engineering specifically.
Yeah.
They were really putting the arts to the side. They were saying, oh, this is pretty and all, but it's just there to give these other people a little more color. You're not important. The people who are important are comp sci and engineering, and the more heavily, even science didn't have all that much. It was mostly, they did start pushing for science, and the science building increased, and they started
with the new
too.
science building.
Yeah, but initially, when we were there, as an artist, I was told that I really had very little role, and I should shut up and just put up with what was being thrown at me. Whereas who was important were the people in the more technical fields.
I suspect, so I had said that there was nothing that I liked about RIT, the culture of RIT when I was there prior to GDT. GDT was my attempt to make RIT better for me and maybe for other people, but ultimately it was a very selfish act that I wanted RIT to be better for me. I suspect that if I were a freshman on RIT today, that I wouldn't feel that sort of alienation that I felt.
Yeah, RIT was like its brutalist architecture.
Yeah.
You had to put up with what you got and make the best of it at the time. And I feel like now there's so many, just seeing the vast variety of clubs and groups where people can get together, it seems like there is a whole there's so much more to offer there than there used to be. It was relatively sparse. While we were there, the RIT Players started.
Yeah.
There were more theatrical productions. There was more outreach and artwork, like the trailer and the Maypole Day.
Yeah. The yearly event, what's it called? Every spring. What is the yearly event in the spring at RIT where there's like a lot of outdoor activities and
Imagine RIT.
maybe
That might be what it is now.
yeah. Yeah, but yeah, that stuff didn't exist when we were started.
Yeah,
But toward the end of our time there, yeah,
they
that
were
stuff.
starting to bring more and more of that in.
But I will make one more plug for the necessity of something like GDT. That places like RIT, they stress the importance of engineering and things like that. It's very Apollonian. You need some Dionysian every now and then. You need that chaos. And when we were there, GDT was definitely an agent of chaos on campus.
Okay. All right. I think we need to do one last. Okay. So stand by.
Commercial break.
Zoom is a fantastic service. Anyways, we ended up we had to start a new recording with only 2 questions left, but it's okay. I didn't want to rush us.
Fix it in
Um,
post.
So
We'll pad it out, don't worry.
yeah, that's okay. Kind of the last main question before I ask for any final thoughts is, what do you think is like the legacy of GDT? Do you think you have inspired potentially other satire newspapers?
I don't think that we have a legacy, to be honest.
I don't know. I think the fact that someone in prison got their hands on GDT astounds me.
Mhm.
How the hell did that happen?
Yeah,
I don't, there's like random walks of GDT volumes that show up across the country. And this was before they would have been able to get internet access. So they had to have gotten a paper copy. So somebody brought a GDT into the prison. And I don't know how that happens. So
yeah, I don't.
there were only so many volumes, episodes, everything, that it's kind of phenomenal if you think about it in a way.
I suppose the legacy really is that the people who read the things that we wrote, we would have left an impression in one way, either positive or negative. Some of the people who worked at GDT, they learned skills that later got them employment.
Yeah,
I mean,
there were a bunch of people who said that these skills helped them get employment, which is amazing.
So, I mean, the legacy, the easy way to say the legacy is that GDT ended up helping people get jobs, believe it or not.
Connecting people from various parts of the world and country.
Actually, that's very true. Within the group that we're still in contact with, so many of them were involved with GDT, and it's that connection group that has helped them succeed.
Yeah.
So in terms of the people who are involved in the production of GDT, there's a measurable outcome of success, really, that when you look at how well those people have done, they got in contact with one another through GDT, have stayed in contact with one another all these years, and have been able to leverage that contact to have very, very successful jobs, very successful histories. But in terms of our legacy, like on RIT, for example, most people have never heard of Gracies Dinnertime Theater.
But again, it's 4 years.
Yeah.
And then you're done.
Yeah.
So...
Your memory, I forget what editorial I wrote, but RIT's memory is 4 years max. And it's gone. It is an institution, as is the case with any university, really, that it has amnesia every 4 years. It's
actually a little bit longer than that, because you'll have an overlap
gap
in there. Because I heard people talking about the Barefoot Girl several years after I'd left.
But there's institutional amnesia.
Yeah.
Which is not a bad thing, I don't think. I think it allows an institution to not get stuck in its past, and it allows it to grow and become this new thing. It can remake itself. So the legacy of GDT, we were something of that time. And I think that's, yeah, I think that we left a mark during that time.
We left a mark with the people who were there at that time. Yeah.
I suspect that if you talk to a number of people from that time period, if they were reading GDT, they would remember it. They would have things to say. But yeah, we left a mark on the people who were there at the time. But in terms of people that came later, it's all our legacy now is rumor and story,
Speculation.
which I love. I mean, the whole idea, in many ways, GDT, the main articles, were telling stories. And now GDT is a story. Look at that sculpture. There was some satire publication, and that's their logo. Or did you read that the CIA was involved on campus? So yeah, we're a story now. Just an echo, but a story.
The other thing I would indicate for this is that at any given time, we might go back in and start making things without letting anybody know, and just start adding volumes onto the end of GDT
Yeah.
where it is, because we'd do that.
I mean, I'm not saying that we have things ready to publish, but you know,
It could happen,
there's nothing that would
but
stop us.
we're not going to tell anybody. We're just going to let them go up.
Yeah.
Okay, and the final question is, do you have any last thoughts about, anything that we discussed over the course of these 2.5 hours?
I want to reiterate the importance of the press and the ability to look at the world around you and laugh at it.
And I want to press upon the importance of the bonds that get made. You don't make something like GDT for so many years with so many people without creating really strong bonds that continue. It's 20 years ago, and we're still in contact with the people we worked with at GDT. A lot of them.
I can't say that about any other group that I've been involved with.
Yeah. We're still on excellent terms. And so beyond anything else, we made really good friends just finding a group of people that we clicked with. And that's what GDT was.
And again, it might be, the filter that, only a certain type of person is going to be attracted to come and hang out and play along with that. So of course we ended up being friends with them. But yeah, we walked away with really close lifelong friends out of doing GDT. And my hope is that other people that were involved in GDT, including the later editors and groups, I hope that they feel the same way, that they found a family. So the one more thing related to this, the bonding of it, the reason why there's a food motif that runs throughout the whole thing. Gracie's Dinnertime Theater, Hell's Kitchen, cereal. Many of the things that were associated with intentionally had a food motif, because food is so important to bonding and sharing.
When we would get together to write the articles, we would often share food at the same time. So there is an emotional connection at the same time when we're writing these things.
We were very conscious of how to organize things and how to try and make people comfortable and get along, and how do you form those bonds that are necessary when you are talking about sometimes horrible things that are going on in the world. How do you create bonds with people that people are going to be comfortable doing that and being open to, okay, here's a horrible idea, let's run with it. What is the logical conclusion when we take this horrible idea and expand on it? It's not easy to build that trust. So you share food, you share stories, you get to know people. And in the process, of course, you get to know them really well. Yeah, I think that's it.
Okay, well, that was all of the questions that I had. Thank you so much for being available to talk about this. IT history means a lot to me, so I'm happy that I was able to preserve at least some of it. But yeah, I'll be ending the recording now. Stay on though. I have a couple last things to say.
Sure.